Welcome to the Tech and Space Leaders Show, where we learn lessons from leaders of the next frontier. I am your host, Lisa Dreher, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today, Neal Sofian. He is the CEO of Tuzag. Welcome to the show, Neal.
Nice to be here.
Thanks so much for making time to be here. So I'm really excited to learn more about the work that Tuzag is doing. Can you just give us a little bit of an overview about yourself and Tuzag?
Sure. So I'm Neal Sofian. I'm CEO. I am a public health guy. I'm not a tech guy. I'm a public health guy. My career has been spent way too long. Back when there was no computers. Pretty much, we were still a mimeograph society when I got started in public health, and I focused on pretty much how do you use public health thinking and technology, then ultimately use technologies to change consumer behavior. So whether that's getting you to get your vaccination, topical, nice topic, or quit smoking, or get care that you need. How do you do that, and how can you use technology to get more millions of people to do that sort of thing? First big one was, in 1986, believe it or not, the telephone was hot technology. So it's like, could you use the phone to call people and get them to quit smoking? Seems like today you'd go, yeah, big whoop. But in 1986, it was a randomized clinical trial with the National Cancer Institute. And indeed, we did figure out you could get people to quit smoking by mailing materials, having calls, in some cases supporting with pharmaceutical support. Today, that program is called Quit for Life. 7 million people have quit with the program, and it's the largest smoking cessation program in the world. And that became the basis for phone coaching. Well, then after that came things like thinking like tailoring, or how do you use social platforms for building sorts of things. So we built, my next company built a thing called the Cancer Survivors Network, which was for the American Cancer Society. Today, you might say it looks a lot like Facebook for cancer, except for it was 1998, and Mark Zuckerberg was maybe 12. So he wasn't building anything yet. And so we were designing that in terms of how you build contextually relevant communities of care for people around that, end of life care, diabetes, aging. That company got sold, and then we got very involved in building very tailored communications. And now ultimately, in a world where everything has gone from mailing things that take weeks to get a response to milliseconds when you can get a response through the web or through a digital thing, well, tailored communication all of a sudden is actually a conversation, not just tailoring and pushing information. So that's the world I'm in now.
Got it. Wow. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about what Tuzag does.
So Tuzag is, what would be the best way to put it? Tuzag is looking at solving the problem of engaging people with almost their own personal digital companion that happens between clinical visits. It's where life happens. That's where most of everything happens. And how do you help activate them to do things? How do you navigate them to care? How do you help their caregivers find the services they need? How do you give them the meaningful support? So we've coined the term, instead of thinking of generative AI or even conversational AI, it's how do you build relationship AI? And that's a very different approach to things, and that's pretty much what we're doing.
Right. So what would you say are some of the biggest missing pieces in today's ongoing healthcare programs?
Well, I give you an idea. We named our product Clara, and you go like, everybody's come up with names for things. Well, the reason we picked Clara is because Clara Barton was the founder of the American Red Cross. She was known as the angel of the battlefield during the Civil War. And her whole focus was how she provided services and support in any capacity required. And her focus was on delivering relief, guidance, care to those in need, wherever, however long it was needed, with love and compassion. And that sounds very different than what we do today. What we do today is we talk about patient education or patient activation, not people, but patients, or we have a 360 view of patients, and that our goal is to provide health literacy to people. Well, health literacy is nice, but kind of it doesn't do squat. I live by two mottos in life. One is be yourself. Unless you're a schmuck, then be somebody else, which is not relevant here. But the other is it ain't dog food if the dog don't eat it. And it's an old marketing phrase. So what we should be focusing on is how do we actually get people to do things? And information is important, but information needs to be surrounded by the context of a person's life, not just their illness, but what's important to them. Health is merely a means to an end. It is not an end in itself. You don't try and spend your whole life just so I can say I'm healthy. You are healthy so that you can be active, so that you can have relationships, so that you can get married and have a career and have kids and see the world. There's all kinds of things that are about in terms of your values, your life goals, and all that. Health is a conveyance for that. If I don't understand those things about you, if I don't actually take the time to learn about you in terms of that kind of context, chances are when I talk to you about getting you to do something, you're not going to do it if it's not meaningful to you from your perspective. And so what is missing in all of this is that for all the talk about being consumer centric, fundamentally, we're all about driving a medical care system that's a business, and it's about trying to get outcomes that we want them to have. We aren't asking them, what do you care about, and how do we drive that business for you in whatever way that is? And it's a totally different way of thinking. It's not rocket science, but it's completely foreign to the way U.S. healthcare tends to operate.
Right. So extending upon that, there are a lot of healthcare providers that use chatbots and AI to support their clients or their customers or their patients. How do you, I guess, what's missing with those current solutions that are being used?
Well, first what we do is we tend to, in most of the world, we're scraping data that's medical data or health risk data. So I can find out that Lisa is this, she weighs this much, she's this old, she has these diseases, she's taking these drugs. Do you think that defines who you are? Right? You'd like to think you're slightly more than that, right? But that means I have to ask questions about you, like, what do you care about? What are your values? What floats your boat? What are your hobbies? Do you have pets? Do you have kids? If you are you one of those cat ladies? Excuse that. How topical. But if you do have a cat, what's your cat's name? Because it's important. Like I have a cat over here, big, 20 pounds of cat. But if you want to talk to me about Big. Or if you know that I'm a baseball fan. Those are things so that if you can say, hey, how about that? The Mariners lost last night yet again, and commiserate with me. Well, it's building that relationship with you around what you care about and within the context or even the metaphors on how I talk about a care issue with you may be essential to saying, I use a metaphor that's a baseball metaphor for me. It may be a completely meaningless metaphor to you, so I need to do the right one for you. Or I need to know, a great example is, I was talking to some people at a large pharmacy chain, and their head pharmacist, when I told them about, we would know the name of their pet, and we could provide that to the pharmacist so that when somebody walks up, amongst other things, as well as knowing all the things they're buying, wouldn't it be cool if as you're about to walk away after I handed you your prescription, the pharmacist said, hey, wait a second, Lisa, and pulls out a milk bone and says, be sure to give this to Snoopy when you get home. You now own that person in terms of a relationship. They will be back, so it's good business, but it's because you showed you cared about them.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing we have to build, but that's a whole, and as well, and not just them, but their caregivers as well, because there's a whole ecology of people surrounding that individual. And you have to have that same relationship with all of them if you're going to move the needle on, particularly on chronic care issues.
Right. So how do you, I guess, to a certain extent, that might feel a little creepy, right? So how do you keep it relevant, but also not like somebody's knowing something about you that perhaps you don't remember ever telling them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's an issue of often scraping data versus an old-fashioned concept of asking. Instead of saying, I scraped all this data and I now know that Lisa has a dog and she does this and she, I was able to find out she has a ski pass from last year. So she's a skier. That's kind of like, think of this more like a dating app that way. The worst way to get to a second date is to act like you know way too much about the person you're going out with, because then it's like, that does seem very creepy. But a great first date is where you spend your time asking the other person, tell me about yourself. Oh, that's fascinating. What? Oh, what do you like to do for fun? Oh, you like movies? What kind of movies do you like? I'm literally engaging you in a conversation, and then I have to remember that. And then,
Right.
and then next time, and then I can use that to say, the next time I might be a movie that I use as a metaphor, and I happen to know you like period dramas. And I can all of a sudden say, just like in Pride and Prejudice, blah, blah, blah. It's all, but that you've given me permission to do that by asking. The other is, I can ask, if I want to scrape data, I can literally ask your permission. May I see your medical records? Yes or no. And if they say no, okay. Or can I use Bluetooth information? Like, can I take your blood pressure and get that information even as we're talking? And if you say yes, yay. If you say no, I'll ask you. And if you don't want to share with me, I can say, okay, well then let's move on to the next. I mean, it's like what we would do if we were in a human relationship. We just have to build those conversations like we would with a human.
Right. So tell me, how does all of this impact the actual outcomes? Because I think that ultimately, right, what you're trying to impact is having people live healthier, happier lives, right? And so, how does having more of that, like you were talking about, that contextually relevant AI supporting the healthcare, how does that actually impact more positive living, healthy living?
Okay. Let me give you some numbers. 50% of all healthcare costs, so we're talking over $2 trillion a year in the US, is tied to consumer behavior. What you eat, do you move, do you go to the right, did you pick the right doctor, did you take your pills? It's all consumer behavior. 50% of all costs. So we're talking somewhere around $2.25 trillion. 40% of all healthcare outcomes are tied to that consumer behavior. So the outcomes, 40%, diabetes, when you get down to it, is are you exercising? Are you managing your weight? You're managing your glucose? It's all behavior. It's absolutely all behavior. And this is where all the costs are coming from. Okay, now compare that against the fact that the average American is going to spend approximately 60 minutes with a provider during the year. Now that's obviously way different between the non-users and that's the mean. Did you ever see the musical Rent?
Yes.
525,600 minutes. That's how many minutes there are in a year, right? So 60 minutes at the doctor, that only leaves 525,540 minutes left where health happens. Not in the provider's office, it's out there. And if you cannot impact people on their day-to-day lives, there's no chance that you're going to affect the behaviors or the concomitant costs that are tied to it. So and yet, how much money are we spending on consumer behavior change? Out of those trillions of dollars, less than 2%. We'll spend all kinds of money on your genome, on your biome, on new drugs, on new robotic surgical procedures, billions and billions and billions. But when you get down to the saying, how do I change Lisa or Neal? We spend almost nothing. And what we have to do instead of genome and biome, we also need to have, this sounds cheesy, but your myome. Who is me? And how do I then talk to you in whatever way or whatever channel makes sense to you on an ongoing basis to help you through managing your day to accomplish what you care about, your life desires, to have the best life you can have.
Right, right. So how are you actually communicating with the patients? Obviously different people, different ages, different age groups, different, whatever, different access to the internet, all of these types of things, where you live, all of those things can impact the ability to even take advantage of a solution like this.
Yep.
How does this work?
if it's done correctly, it's Burger King. Have it your way. If you are somebody who just has a landline, it should be able to. You should be able to have a voice on the landline using interactive voice response. If you prefer chat and you like your thumbs, great, do your thumbs. If you like to use your keyboard and you want to do this through email or chat, great. If you want to do it through your smart speaker, great. If you want to ultimately do it through your television, and it actually tailors the communication through your television, great. And in fact, it may be all of the above in any given circumstance. I might have something where I another time I'll do a demo with you. It'll be fun. And I might use a smart speaker, but in the course of that smart speaker conversation, I'll also take my blood pressure and it'll read the blood pressure as we're talking. And she'll go, wow, that's a little high today as we're talking. And then she'll say, hey, did you take your pills today? Yes. Did you have any problems with it? No. Or yes, I did. I'm constipated. Oh, have you let your contact team know about it? No. Well, would you like me to send a tailored message to your provider and let them know? And off goes a text message to them, which can also then escalate to a phone call back to a live provider. Okay, and then let me send you a tailored text or a email as a follow-up. Well, maybe you only want to do it with print because you don't want to talk to anybody. Great, it'll tailor the message and it'll mail it to you. On Tuesday I want to use my smart speaker. On Wednesday I'm on my mobile phone, so I want it to be a different way. It should be any way you want, and it should change. And it should also be, when I think about omni-channel, it's not just a message to you. It may well be, and particularly as we start thinking about mental health issues and aging, it may be as important that I have that conversation, not just going with you, but it may be your adult child who's also receiving messages about, hey, your mom didn't seem like she was tracking quite the same today. Or, you might want to check in with her, and it's like, or that message that goes back to a provider and says, hey, Neal's looking a little, he's having a senior moment. We older people who are on Medicare, what can I say? But it's that. So you're thinking about a whole ecology of communication, a whole ecology of care, both the medium and who's involved in the conversation changes from day to day, because guess what? Your life circumstance changes from day to day. And so the way to think of this is instead of a standard set of algorithms that the old-fashioned games where you'd get in the game and you just play by the rules. This is how Monopoly works. Well, if you think much more like the kind of gaming world we live in today, where there's first-person games, Call of Duty, Doom, all this sort of stuff. You are the center, and everything morphs to your needs as you go through the game. That's where this all needs to be going, is to think about this is always from that perspective. And as your circumstance changes, so does the game. And so do the messages and who's involved in the messages. And those are going to be dynamic over time, because that's what relationships are like. That's the way the world actually is. And that's a very different point of view than following medical protocol. And yet at the same time, you need to make sure that you're limited so that your conversations are like the holodeck in Star Trek. It can seem endless, but it's still limited to the rules of what it can talk about. So it's not going to be pushing ivermectin to you for your COVID.
Great. Well, Neal, I'm really excited about the work that you and the folks at Tuzag are doing. Thank you so much for making time to be here today.
Oh, my pleasure. This is fun. If you can't tell, I love talking about this.
Well, and as you should. So thank you so much. And I also do want to take a moment to thank GuideForce for hosting these sessions. To learn more about GuideForce, you can visit guideforce.com. And we'll see you next time on the Tech and Space Leaders Show.